For centuries, the prevailing view of spiritual realization has been something like this. You begin to intuit that there is more to life than making a living and raising a family. As this feeling deepens, you set out on a quest, a journey that may take years, finding and following a teacher's guidance, developing spiritual awareness, and so on. Thus, the popular metaphor used to describe this is the path. In a world defined for centuries by time and space, the idea of a path, a progressive voyage leading to a destination, made sense. But as we move into a quantum world in which time and space are no longer the dependable constituents of reality, is it still useful? How do we envision spiritual development in a multidimensional world where our conception of reality is challenged by paradoxical discoveries? One of these is called superposition, the ability of a particle to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Only when that particle is measured or observed will it collapse into and display only one of those states. Looking through this lens at spirituality raises an interesting possibility. According to the path paradigm, we can, indeed should, develop higher states of being. Kindness and generosity, for example, are states we should aspire to in our daily lives. But if, in our very essences, we are made of quantum stuff, then perhaps our state is not something we are, nor a quality we possess, but merely a function of what manifests, what collapses into reality at the moment of observation. All states are always within us as potentials. Only in the living moment of interaction does one of those states congeal, determining who we are in that moment. So kindness, etc., is not something we develop and deploy. It arises, or doesn't, in a particular relationship. And spirituality is not about trying to become a kinder, etc. person, but about being radically available to the optimum state that may emerge in a moment of relatedness. A moment in which, by the way, kindness or generosity may or may not be called for. Another startling feature of this emerging reality is quantum entanglement, where two or more particles become linked in such a way that their properties instantaneously mirror each other regardless of the distance between them. If one is observed to have a positive spin, for example, we can be sure the other spins identically, even if it's in a galaxy far, far away. How can our notion of time account for this sort of communication? In the existing paradigm of spiritual guidance, communication is usually a top-down bipolar channeling of information through time. The teacher, who is above the student in experience and knowledge, gradually conveys the teachings. In a universe of entanglement, spiritual communication may happen in a global field of instantaneous awareness, rather than through the transmission of ideas between individuals. We can only speculate about how this might happen. One possibility is that by tuning into a particular vibrational frequency, we join a web of information nodes or potentials housed in that frequency, giving us immediate access to the insights on that quote-unquote network. The student still needs to listen in order to detect that information, but listening is now omnidirectional throughout the entire information system, rather than focused exclusively on the teacher. Entanglement is more than just a different communication modality. It provides a different order of knowledge. When a pearl of wisdom is delivered from above, it arrives already formed by the teacher's language and context. But when you bring a pearl to the surface of your mind from the sea of entanglement, it has been found and formed by you, named in your language, given your context. It's your pearl. Perhaps the most dramatic quantum challenge to our conventional understanding of reality and spiritual development is the Copenhagen interpretation, a philosophical view based on the premise that quantum particles exist in all of their possible states until they are observed. Only then do they display a specific reality. The implication here is almost impossible to accept, that the reality we believe to be objective, persistent, and imbued with definite properties only exists when it is measured or observed. In other words, consciousness spawns reality, not the other way around. This doesn't mean that the only reality is the one of which I am conscious, rather that the one I am conscious of is the only reality as far as my consciousness is concerned. Let's take the climate crisis as an example. There's no question that climatic forces of planet Earth are having drastic impacts on ecologies everywhere. We can presume that this is happening whether anyone observes it or not. But the climate crisis, seen as a looming threat arising from human activity that must be solved, is real only to the consciousness that perceives it. It may be the actual, unquestionable reality that individual consciousness inhabits, but ultimately it's a worldview, not the world itself. The map is not the territory. The territory exists whether anyone maps it or not. This is the paradox of consciousness. It experiences a localized certainty in the midst of a boundless uncertainty. We have no choice but to live within that three-dimensional, time-based, hard-edged certainty, although moment-by-moment consciousness may actually be no more than a transient bubble of relative knowledge adrift in an expanse of absolute unknowability. What does it mean to be spiritual in the light of these quantum discoveries? How do we live within, for example, a climate crisis that is both real, requiring immediate responsible action, and at the same time, an ephemeral narrative no more substantive than any other mapping of consciousness? If the path metaphor no longer seems to provide a satisfactory answer to this question, what could? In the next video, we'll offer a possibility, the holosphere, a metaphor suggesting that spiritual work could be seen as not a progression toward enlightenment, but as an always now revelation.